Chrystia Freeland's leadership campaign launch was supposed to be her moment to shine, a chance to prove she's ready to lead the Liberal Party and, potentially, the country. But instead of a triumphant debut, it turned into a complete disaster. Over a dozen protesters interrupted her speech, shouting her down, waving banners, and even pounding on the doors. The chaos was so relentless that Freeland struggled to deliver her message, and the event quickly spiraled out of control. But here's the real question. Was this just a bad day for Freeland, or does it reveal something much deeper? Is her campaign already doomed before it's even begun? And with rivals like Mark Carney waiting in the wings? Could this humiliation be the beginning of the end for Freeland's leadership ambitions? Stick around, because we're diving into the chaos, the drama, and what this means for the future of Canadian politics. The protesters take over? The chaos began almost immediately. As Chrystia Freeland stepped up to the podium, the applause had barely died down before the first interruption. Protesters began shouting slogans, waving banners, and pounding on the doors, completely disrupting the event. Freeland's supporters tried to drown them out with chants and applause, but the interruptions kept coming, again and again.
Thank you. I am so glad to be here at the St. Albans Boys and Girls Club today. I think we have shown that when we are a team, we can do anything!
At one point, the noise was so overwhelming that Freeland had to stop mid-sentence, smiling awkwardly as she waited for the protesters to be removed. But the interruptions didn't stop there. Over a dozen protesters were eventually escorted out, but not before they made their message loud and clear. The event, which was supposed to showcase Freeland's leadership, quickly descended into chaos. And here's where it gets interesting. There is speculation that these protesters weren't just random activists. Could they have been planted by Freeland's rivals within the Liberal Party to sabotage her campaign? Or was this a reflection of growing dissatisfaction with the Trudeau government's policies, particularly on foreign affairs? Either way, the damage was done. Freeland's response: composure or cracks? Despite the chaos, Chrystia Freeland tried to maintain her composure. Each time the protesters interrupted, she paused, smiled, and thanked the audience for their patience. But as the interruptions continued, cracks in her calm demeanor began to show. Her voice wavered slightly, and her attempts to regain control of the room became increasingly strained. Freeland repeatedly tried to steer the focus back to her message, referencing the St. Albans Boys and Girls Club, a community organization she was highlighting in her speech. But instead of inspiring the audience, these references felt like a crutch, a way to fill the awkward silences between interruptions. Even her supporters seemed unsure of how to respond, as the energy in the room shifted from excitement to frustration.
You know, I guess some people are really scared of Canada fighting back. I guess someone really... I guess. Look, we are not going to let anyone disrupt our democracy.
But was this the response of a strong leader, or someone struggling to keep control? Freeland's repeated calls for calm and her insistence that democracy will not be disrupted came across as rehearsed rather than genuine. And as the interruptions dragged on, it became clear that the event was slipping further and further out of her control. Commentators were quick to point out that the lack of security and preparation at the event reflected poorly on Freeland's campaign team. If she couldn't even control the room during her big moment, how could she hope to lead a divided Liberal Party or a divided country? Before we continue, I have a quick favor to ask. If you're enjoying the content, why not take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel? Believe it or not, over 98% of you watch without subscribing. Hitting that button is free and helps us out more than you know. Thanks a bunch. Now, let's get back to the video. The broader political context: while the chaos of the protesters dominated the headlines, Freeland's speech also revealed the broader stakes of her leadership campaign. She positioned herself as the candidate who could stand up to Donald Trump and protect Canada's sovereignty. Freeland reminded the audience of her role in the NAFTA negotiations, framing herself as a battle-tested leader who's already fought for Canada on the global stage. But her attacks on conservative leader Pierre Poilievre were particularly sharp. Freeland accused Poilievre of being weak and aligning himself with Trump's ideology, claiming that he would fail to defend Canadian values. She painted herself as the only leader capable of delivering a true Canadian response to the challenges ahead.
Canadians want good jobs, homes they can afford, and great care for their kids. They want a government that is as careful with Canada's money as Canadians are with their own. These bread and butter issues are more important today than ever because our country is facing what could well be an existential threat. Tomorrow, Donald Trump will be inaugurated as President of the United States. He has threatened to hit Canada with 25% tariffs on everything we sell to the US. He wants to steal our jobs and drive away investment. He has spoken clearly and repeatedly about making our Canada the 51st state. Yeah, and he's threatened to use economic coercion to do so.
You have to stop him.
Yeah, that is absolutely right. We do have to stop him, and we will. So here's my promise. If you choose me to become leader of the Liberal Party and Prime Minister, I will lead a true Canadian response to the threat we now face. We will be united. We will be strong. We will be smart. And that's why we will win.
But not everyone was convinced. Critics argued that Freeland's attacks on Poilievre and Trump felt more like desperate attempts to rally support than a genuine vision for Canada's future. And the interruptions by Palestinian protesters only added to the perception that Freeland's campaign was out of touch with the concerns of everyday Canadians. The protesters' focus on Canada's foreign policy, particularly its stance on Israel, highlighted divisions within the Liberal Party itself. Freeland's unwavering support for Israel has alienated some voters, and the chaotic event underscored the growing dissatisfaction with the Trudeau government's policies. For Freeland, this wasn't just a bad day. It was a reminder of the uphill battle she faces in uniting a fractured party and winning over a skeptical public. The protesters' message. Why Freeland? The protesters weren't just there to disrupt, they had a message. Their chants and banners criticized Chrystia Freeland's unwavering support for Israel during the ongoing conflict in Gaza. They accused her of ignoring the plight of Palestinians and called out the Trudeau government's foreign policy as being one-sided and out of touch with global human rights concerns. Freeland, to her credit, addressed the protesters directly. She defended their right to protest, saying, "This is what democracy looks like." But she also made it clear that disrupting others' freedom of speech was unacceptable. Her attempt to strike a balance between acknowledging the protesters and continuing her speech was met with mixed reactions. Some saw it as a sign of strength, while others viewed it as a weak attempt to deflect criticism.
Ms. Freeland, thank you for taking my question. Ahmed El-Bayoumi with Polycorner, and I do hope moving forward we can have more opportunities to ask questions. I'd like to ask you about the elephant in the room. You were interrupted by over a dozen protesters unhappy with the Trudeau government's response to the war in Gaza. Over a dozen people were kicked out, the room thinned out, and some told us that they were arbitrarily kicked out by your campaign team. Organizers say it's a result of repeated attempts by constituents of yours to reach you to, and I quote, to address her unwavering support for Israel's military operations in Gaza. We haven't seen this at any other campaign launch, not at Ms. Gould, not at Mr. Carney's. Why do you think you're being singled out by these protesters? And is there anything of substance that you can say to their concerns about the government's response to the war?
Thank you for the question. I do want to say I am really grateful that we live in a democracy. I am really grateful that we live in a country where everyone can express their view and where everyone has the right to protest. That is an amazing thing about Canada, and it's really important that people can disagree with each other and that everyone can state their view. It's also the case that the right to protest doesn't include the right to disrupt other people's right to speech. That is also essential about Canada. We cannot allow protest doesn't mean drowning out other people's voices. That is entirely unacceptable. That is not how Canadian democracy works. And I know that Canadians are not going to stand for that, and neither will I. When it comes to the Middle East, let me just say I am cautiously optimistic about the ceasefire in Gaza. I think we all share that sense of cautious optimism. For me, and I think for all of us, what has happened has been absolutely heartbreaking. It has been awful to see the images, to hear the stories, to see the carnage. That is absolutely unacceptable. Canada has been calling for a ceasefire. I am cautiously optimistic about the ceasefire that has been announced. It is so important for people to stop dying, and it is so important to recognize the pain, the heartbreak, the tragedy.
But why was Freeland the target? Well, the answer is pretty simple. Freeland's close ties to the Trudeau government make her a lightning rod for criticism. As one of Trudeau's most prominent ministers, she's seen as a continuation of his policies. Policies that have alienated many Canadians, both at home and abroad. The protesters' actions weren't just about Freeland, they were a reflection of the growing dissatisfaction with the Liberal Party as a whole. And then there's the speculation. Were these protesters truly independent activists? Or was this chaos orchestrated by Freeland's rivals within the Liberal Party? With the leadership race heating up, some have suggested that this could have been a calculated move to undermine her campaign. Whether or not that's true, one thing is certain: the damage to Freeland's image was done. Freeland's leadership pitch: strength or desperation? Amid the chaos, Chrystia Freeland tried to deliver her leadership pitch, a message of strength, resilience, and experience. She emphasized her track record as finance minister and foreign minister, highlighting her role in standing up to Donald Trump during the NAFTA negotiations and introducing $10 a day daycare. Freeland framed herself as a battle-tested leader who knows how to fight for Canadians. But as the interruptions continued, her message struggled to land. Freeland's attempts to inspire the audience were overshadowed by the protesters and the awkward pauses that followed each disruption. Even her most passionate lines, like her declaration that she knows how to fight and how to win, felt hollow in the face of the chaos.
As foreign minister, I fought for Canadian jobs and Canadian businesses. As finance minister, I fought for Canadian families. And yes, as deputy prime minister, I fought back against the prime minister when I knew the time had come to put our country first. We need a battle-tested leader with the scars to prove it. Because the stakes for our beloved country are just too damn high. Yeah, I've taken my share of slings and arrows over the years. And I am still standing. Because, you know what? I know how to fight, and I know how to win.
However, Freeland's speech felt like a rehash of past accomplishments rather than a bold vision for the future. Her focus on past battles, while impressive, did little to address the current challenges facing Canadians. And with the repeated interruptions, it became clear that Freeland was struggling to connect with her audience. The protesters may have been the most visible disruption, but the real issue was Freeland's inability to rise above the chaos and deliver a compelling message. For a candidate vying to lead a divided Liberal Party, this was a missed opportunity, and one that her rivals, like Mark Carney, are sure to exploit. What does this mean for Freeland? Chrystia Freeland's leadership campaign launch was supposed to be her moment to shine, a chance to prove she's ready to lead the Liberal Party and, potentially, the country. but instead it became a public spectacle of chaos and humiliation. The repeated interruptions by protesters not only derailed her message, but also raised serious questions about her ability to lead in the face of adversity. For Freeland, this wasn't just a bad day. It was a warning sign. The interruptions exposed deep divisions within the Liberal Party and dissatisfaction with the Trudeau government's policies. And with rivals like Mark Carney and Karina Gould waiting in the wings, Freeland's path to leadership looks more uncertain than ever. The big question now is, can Freeland recover from this disastrous start? Or will this chaotic campaign launch mark the beginning of the end for her leadership ambitions? One thing is certain. If Chrystia Freeland can't control a room, how can she hope to control a country? What do you think about Chrystia Freeland's chaotic campaign launch? Is this the end of her leadership ambitions, or can she bounce back? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update on the latest political drama.